Oh, the thing is lagging so much. Perfect. Hey guys.
Hello.
Can you hear us? So let's wait like 5 minutes for people to join, and then we can kick it off, okay? You can tell me how you're doing so far. Maybe we'll reply some couple of questions in this 5 minutes, and we're gonna move on. Did you guys already start prototyping? Alright, waiting for a couple of more people. Let's kick it off to 50 maybe. We'll see if we can make it in a couple of minutes, and then we can start. Hey, thanks so much for your question, Maxime. Welcome. Yeah, I can answer you quickly before we wait for the people. Yeah, usually it's better to come up with like completely innovative concepts. They always market very well and way better than the games that look alike. But if you think it's unique and it has something very different from our existing Nerf game, why not? Everything is in numbers, so we're gonna test it. We can test it, and if the numbers show a good result, then we can move forward. But of course, here we always stay transparent. Like we will talk definitely to the developers of Nerf Epic Pranks if they see it's a problem. I don't see a big problem, big blocking point here, so no worries for now. For now, for sure, it's okay. And okay, guys, it's 55 of us here, so I think I can kick it off. Thank you so much for joining. This is me, Lola. Some of you know me personally, some of you know me from Nikhil's video, some of you have no idea who I am, so really nice to meet you. Let me kick it off. Today I'm here with Vincent and another game designer, Fantin. They will talk more about actual game design, and we'll give you a really nice masterclass. Please tune in and stay until the end, and you can ask as many questions as you want. So let me recap what was happening yesterday. Yesterday we had a kickoff of the whole game jam. We announced the theme, which is Nerf Toy Blasters, super exciting. We announced how you can submit your game. You basically have to submit it through our automated testing platform called Homa Lab, and you've been invited through the email that you registered with. Okay, maybe it's because I'm in the mask. If you could put up your volume a little bit higher, that would be appreciated, because we all have to wear masks, and maybe that's why my voice is super low. Yeah, just to remind you, check your email that you registered with, because we send you the invitation there. We also shared some assets with you. It's in the Discord channel, in the announcement channel. What else was happening yesterday? So yes, we also shared some really nice references, but guys, it's really extremely important to be innovative. Please don't take these references as games to copy. No, you take it as an example and you come with something great on your own. And actually now Thibaut, the guy who will help you with ideations, is in the Discord channel, so you can talk to him and brainstorm with him, and he can even give you some tips on some trends. Yeah, I'll answer the questions a bit later. So yeah, let's kick off now. Please guys, stay until the end, and then we'll answer all of your questions. I'll try to read some of the questions alongside, but I don't want to, stop the flow of Vincent or Fantin. So I think now I can give the word to Vincent. He can present himself and he will tell you what's up next. Okay with you guys? If something's wrong, please let us know, and if we do some sudden movements, please sorry, because we have a wasp in the room and we don't know where it is. I have my Nerf gun just in case, but I don't want to piss it off. So okay, Vincent, to you.
Thank you very much, Lola. So again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them in the chat. Lola will be following the chat throughout the masterclass and noting the questions for later. So welcome to this first design masterclass on game clarity. Thank you for being there. So let's start with an introduction on game clarity, what it is and why it's important. So because a game is made of a multitude of elements, it's very important that we make them as visibly and functionally clear as possible. The reason why is because players have a limited attention at one point, and so they need to be able to understand everything very quickly that happens on the screen. Especially because in Hypercasual we play on mobile, and so the screen being smaller is even more important than, for example, in the PC game. And so the clarity is based on 4 criteria. The clarity of an element, so the shape of the element, its color, the context in which the element is presented, and also the signs and feedbacks that are associated with this element. So for this masterclass, we're going to focus only on the first 3 criteria, shape, color, and context, and the signs and feedbacks will be addressed by my colleague Fantin in a later masterclass, right after this one. So stay tuned after this masterclass, because the next one will be very interesting for you, I think. So let's start with the first one, called the shapes. And so the shape of an element are very important. It's very important that you identify and separate the different elements you have in your game, and that the shapes that you're using are relevant to the element and also non-misleading. The way you can use shapes is to carry meanings, as we'll see afterwards. Each type of shape has a meaning associated to it. You can also imply physics, so for example, how items will interact with each other in a physical sense. And also you can use it for affordance. So let's start with the first type of shape, what we call the spherical. So it means obviously spheres, balls and stuff like that, but also any kind of shape that's mostly curvy or rounded. They are associated usually with comfort, protection, safety, perfection, and so on. And so, as you can see in those examples, they are usually used for the playable character or the element that the player will play in the game. They are mostly a positive shape. Yeah, for example, this one.
Yeah, can you go for a second? Do you mean by spherical, does it mean also making the edges round instead of the square, or do you only mean that the actual, when you talk about spherical, it means like a literal ball?
Yeah, good question. Actually, any kind of rounded element will suggest a sphere to players. So for example, if you look at the screenshot on the left, the characters themselves, they are not spheres, they are not balls, but the developers used a very big head, big rounded head, and rounded edges to suggest the same effect.
All right. What was the game in the middle of the screenshot?
So the game in the middle screenshot is Split Balls, which is a game that we published in August of last year. And so now we move on to the second type of basic shapes, which is a cubic. Once again, it doesn't mean only cubes. As you can see on the left screenshot, we also have like plates or like rectangles. And even on the right screenshot, it's rounded cubes. And cubic shapes are associated with balance, stability, solidity, and so on. And so they are often used when there is like a feeling of balance to achieve in the game. For example, in stacking games, as we can see in the left and right screenshots, where we balance things on top of each other, including the character in the right screenshot, or in the middle screenshot, which is taken from our game Skyroller, where basically the goal is to make sure the player doesn't fall, and so the elements from the obstacles that you can see in dark and the environment that you can see in white are using blocky shapes to create this feeling of balancing. Then we move on to the third basic shape, which is triangular shapes. In 3D, it can be pyramids, it can be cones, any kind of shape that reminds of a spike most of the time. And so what it creates is it gives the feeling of dynamic tension, action, and aggression, for example. And so it's often used for negative feelings or like danger in games. For example, in the middle screenshot from Not Epic Pranks, you can see that the UI with the exclamation point showing that there is an attention to give to this part of the screen is surrounded by a spiky shape. And so this creates the feeling that this attention that is required implies a danger. In this game, you will see that when there is this element, it means that the player can lose if he doesn't play accordingly. On the left screenshot, you can see that the enemies are using actually spike shapes twice. First of all, with their own shape, so they are like pyramids, but also even their eyes are kind of spiky, reinforcing the feeling that they are dangerous and aggressive. On the right screenshot, you can see two types of shapes of spikes as well. First of all, the characters have spikes on their head, either horns or like spiky haircuts, and even the car itself has some spiky wheels.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be very clear triangle, as long as it's spiky and kind of danger to touch. It already can imply some danger.
Yeah.
Because like if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't maybe notice right away that the guy has horns, or the wheels are basically not round but they are a bit square. So that's interesting.
Yeah, usually the more detailed the 3D model is, the less obvious it's going to be, but it gives more of like an impression or feeling than just saying, okay, this guy is a triangle, like in the first screenshot, for example.
Okay, clear.
Now we can move on to using shapes for physics. So because we have knowledge of how shapes interact in the real world, we can then translate that knowledge in the video game world, and depending on the type of interaction, if they are simple enough, we can expect how objects will interact with each other. For example, in the middle screenshot from ping.io, I know that the ball, if it hits the walls that are planes, it will bounce in a certain way, and because I know how balls interact with walls, I know the angle that it will create. In the right screenshot, it's about the same thing with also the implication of gravity. But on the left screenshot, it's a bit different because I'm pushing a wall using a spherical object. And so I know that because my object is not plane, depending on how I push, it's going to create an angle and it's not going to push properly forward, for example.
What do you think about disrupting these laws of physics? For example, instead of the basketball, you would have triangle or something completely different, like in the shape of, I don't even know, like a cat or something. The cat is actually a bit too casual, that's hyper-casual. But what do you think about disrupting the laws of physics to make it, ragdoll is used so much in hyper-casual. Is it a plus or is it a minus for the game, for marketability or for the game design?
So there are two things that are possible. You can either use a law of physics that doesn't really exist in real life. In that case, it's going to subvert expectations and create potentially funny situations, but also you have to consider the fact that players will not be expecting it. And the other possibility is to use a shape that you would not be used to think in that situation. For example, for the basketball game, using a pyramid, technically it's still going to use real-world physics, but the bounces are going to be unexpected, and so it creates a different type of challenge. It's the same thing, for example, as when you play American football. It's harder to imagine the bounces of the ball than if you were using a basketball. Then we move on to using shapes for affordance. So affordance is using the design to suggest the function. Basically, having an object that can suggest its function by itself. And in our case, for example, in the middle screenshot of split balls, you can see that the end of the level is shaped as a funnel. And because in split balls you will be accumulating smaller balls throughout the game and throughout the level, at the end of the level it's very easy to understand that you have to send all the accumulated spheres in the funnel to finish the level. In the same sense, on the left screenshot, you can see that the object that the player is using is shaped as a donut, and that he has some like bars in the level. And because of the shapes and because of the interaction between the shapes, it's easy to understand that as a player, I'm supposed to put the donuts around the bars. On the right screenshot, it's a bit harder to see, but as you can see, the element on the left, it's kind of like a rolled element, and so I can imagine, because I know that sort of object in real life, I can just unroll it through its shape. So now we move on to using colors. We've talked about shapes, but shapes themselves are not enough to suggest clarity and to make sure players understand perfectly what's happening. So we're going to be using colors as well as shapes as soon as possible. So colors, they have meanings associated to them. It's the same thing as shapes, but we have more colors than basic shapes, and we have more possible meanings. So for example, red, usually it implies danger, excitement, urgency, things like that, and it's mostly used for negative feelings in video games. On the other hand, you have green that implies healing, safety, and positivity, which is usually used for good elements or positive elements. If you use black, you have to consider that usually it's associated with evil and power or even mystery. So once again, it's mostly going to be negative. And on the other hand, white is used with good, holy, purity. You also have purple, which is a bit more tricky, but it's used to suggest quality and nobility. So for example, you can use it to imply that an object is valuable.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, as you know, Hypercasual is a very wide target. So we target people of all beliefs, all of countries. What do you think about the meaning that colors carry throughout different cultures and religions? Will it still work in this case on Hypercasual as well?
Usually it does, as long as it's not the only element used to suggest something. That's why it's always dangerous to use only one type of sign, so for example only shape or only color, because as we have players from all around the world, they might not be as receptive from certain signs as others, so that's why you need usually to combine them as much as possible.
Okay, you need some kind of support behind one
Exactly.
another element. Okay, actually would be really nice to hear from you guys, because I know all of you are from different countries, different cultures. If you take a screenshot or if you take a look at the colors on the screen, and you can tell me, is this true in your country? Is it true in your culture? Because, for example, we're here, Vincent is French, I'm from Kazakhstan. If I see generally, it's true in my country and the same for you?
Usually those meanings are associated with the colors.
Yeah, it would be cool to know, guys, your opinion. Thanks.
So the way you can use colors is, as I said before, to carry meanings, as we'll see in the next few slides, but also to identify factions in games, to show status, to create and define your world, but also for branding, which is particularly concerning this game jam, and also for contrast by using colors with high contrast, or opposite, to use low contrast between elements. So for example, let's take the color red, which, as I mentioned, is usually used for like negative elements or like danger. And so for example, if we take the middle screenshot from North Epic Pranks, we see that the vision cone from the character is red, meaning that being seen by the character in this game has a negative aspect. Usually it means potentially losing, which is the case for North Epic Pranks. So for example, if I take the right screenshot, this time it's literally the enemies that are red, which implies that they are dangerous and I should not let them come to me. If I now take the color green, which I said was a positive color, usually it's going to be used to imply success or like positive feelings. For example, in Scarola, as soon as you go through an obstacle, the obstacle becomes green, meaning that you've completed it. So it gives a feeling of completion. On the other hand, in Border Patrol, which is the middle screenshot, the green color used for the approved message is not there as a success, but more as a confirmation, a validation of the message. On the other hand, on the third screenshot, as you can see, we have a gradient going from red to green. And so this suggests that doing the input when the bar is into green is better than doing it when the bar is into red. And now we move on to using colors to define factions. Usually what happens is when you have a game with multiple units from the same factions, teams, battles, things like that, you will use color to the same units from the same faction. And so for example, if I take the middle screenshot from catandmouse.io, I can see that even though the characters have different skins in the game, they still carry the color from their team and it's very visible. That way I can instantly, as a player, see whether the characters around me are from my team, so allies, or from the enemy team, so dangerous to me. The same thing that you can do is when you have a large-scale battle, the color used for units, in that case, creates sort of a shape aspect, which helps that at a glance you can see overall how many units you have and whether you're winning or losing the battle. And now we use also colors to show the status of an element. So for example, it can be used to show that an element is active or inactive. In the left screenshot from our game Tower Color, you can see that the bottom blocks are monochrome and dark, while the top blocks are of various colors. In this game, it means that I can use the blocks on top, but not the one at the bottom. It's the same system used in the middle game Combine It, where basically the playable block is blue, which means I can use it, but the gray blocks, I'm not using them yet because they are for now inactive. It can also be used to show whether an element is healthy or damaged, such as shown in the right screenshot, because the enemies in this game change their color based on how much health point they've lost.
But sorry, in the third game, so the green is full health and the blue is not full health, because here I think can it be sometimes a bit confusing. For example, here the enemies are different sizes, but also they're different colors. So how do you make sure that you're not using the whole rainbow? Because thanks to your amazing masterclass, now I think maybe developers will be getting too excited about using the whole range of rainbow and put it everywhere. How to make sure that you are actually staying within the lines?
So usually what you design are steps of health. You're not going to change the color every time your enemy takes a hit. But you also use, as you mentioned, the size of the enemy, because showing both at the same time will imply a change in state. So for example, if I see that my enemy gets smaller and change color, I know it has taken damage. If I just use the color, I cannot be as sure unless my color code is really strong and carries on through the game. So now we move on to world building, which is very important, especially in Hypercasual. So for example, those screenshots are a series of levels from our game North Epic Pranks. And as you can see, we have very defined colors for each world. And this has two advantages. First of all, it creates consistency, because as I play through the different levels of the same world, I will keep use the same colors, so I know that I'm in this world and I'm staying for X amount of levels. But then it also creates a feeling of progression. When I move on to the next world and I see that the color change, I know that I've reached a new milestone, a new step in my progression. And then we have the colors for branding. So in our game, they are used in 2 ways. First of all, you have the color of the brand itself, and then you have colors used specifically for different products of the brand. As you can see from the game, Nerf Epic Pranks, depending on which line of blasters you're using, they are not using the same colors. And so basically, if I see a blaster of the same color of one of the 3, I know which line of blaster it is. Then we move on to using colors for contrast. So the contrast is used to highlight different elements on the screen, or the opposite, to actually hide elements that we don't want to attract attention on. For example, if I take the left screenshot from Skyroller, I can see that there is a very strong contrast between the obstacles that are dark and the environment that is mostly white. And so I can see very easily where the obstacles are, how long they are, the disposition, the timing that I have between obstacles. On the other hand, the background itself is very faded, which means it doesn't attract the eye of the player. And so I can focus on what actually matters, which is the gameplay. It's the same system used in Combine It, where the center of the screen is very dark, except for the player. So this helps noticing where the player is. But also, because the surrounding of the screen is white, it will reinforce the focus on the center of the screen, which is where the gameplay happens, and which is where we want the visibility for the player. For the last screenshot, everything is very bright around basically everything except what actually matters. So like the characters, whether it's enemies or players, they are very visible because everything else is monochromatic except for like shadows.
Don't you think that Kerun here is asking, isn't it too bright, the last screenshot, for the eyes, for the even your hypercasual, if you're spending small amount of time on the game, isn't it too bright for your eyes?
So it can be. The thing you have to take into account is right now it's a screenshot. When you're playing the game, it actually moves, which means your attention will be focusing more on the elements that move, and so you will be focusing less on the white surrounding the screen.
Yeah, makes sense. Also, I wanted to add, because Combine It, we were working on it together. If Dmitry is in chat, it's shout out to him. Great job. It was published, I think, around a year ago. And I remember the first ever prototype of Combine It had whitish background and grayish elements. And then we made like a lot of iteration on this. And actually, this what worked at the end is a dark background and very bright elements on it. Even we added some particles to make it even stand out more, if you remember. Yeah. So guys, like just to recap and just give you some insight that Combine It looked a bit more, how do you call this, less contrasty, yeah. Very whitish, and this was the best version that we came up with and scaled. And wait, let me see. Off-white color schemes, do they work better on the CPI test? Yeah, so what is better, to have a super colorful game versus monochrome game that actually we get asked a lot during the prototyping phase?
So it really depends. We've seen black and white games work really well. Usually if it's fully black and white, that can be an issue, so I would suggest having some color that you can potentially use for the background. But also, like, if you want to do a contrast within a game, it doesn't necessarily mean black and white. You can have two different colors that are very colorful, but using them as a contrast. Or even you can have the type of contrast that we use in Skyroller, where basically the background is of color. It's neither black nor white, but because we use faded color, it doesn't take from the attention of the player. So you can use that as a contrast as well.
Yeah, as well as the Nerf Epic Pranks. It's a very colorful game. Yeah. Hey Dima. Like Nerf Epic Pranks is a very colorful game, but you see that the background is still in the same color scheme and monotonous, where the character is standing out, and you can see that this is an active character that you're playing with.
And so now we move on to the context So the context of the game is basically the game setting. It's where everything will happen and will make sense. So because of your context, your rules have sense and purpose. If you just take rules by themselves, you can never fully imply the message that your shape or your color is supposed to give. And so in order for your context to work, it needs consistency, as we'll see afterwards. And also it can help you build symbols that work either universally or for your game specifically. So consistency means that basically if you use colors and shapes to define certain elements, certain effects or interactions, you need to be consistent with it throughout the game, and those shapes and colors should carry their meaning. For example, in Scarola, what we do is the elements that can make the player fall, which is what you're trying to avoid in the game, they all use the same color scheme and they all use the same blocky feeling. And so that way, if I encounter a new element that looks like this, I know I have to be careful and I know overall what can happen to me. Same thing for split balls, but in a different way. Basically, because I have encountered throughout the game some UI like this, with like a rounded shape with something written on it, either a number or a letter, and I've seen that I can go through one of them. I know that I will be able to go through any of them. The effect might be different, but basically the goal is the same. So we have ball multipliers, we also have locks, and we even have portals, which are the A and A thing on the right screenshot. Now for symbols. Symbols, basically, they give details about the rules of the game world. Some of them are universal, and you can use them in any game. For example, if you use a checker pattern at the end of the level, most people will understand that this means the finish line, whether it's an actual line or just an area. But on the other hand, some symbols can only have their full meaning in the game that you're showing. So for example, on the left screenshot of Nerf Epic Pranks, once again we have the exclamation point. So an exclamation point surrounded by a red shape universally means that attention is required to that position. So it can be used, for example, for notification purposes. But in that game, the purpose of this symbol is only fully understood because you've played the game and because you know what requires attention and what this attention will let you avoid or not avoid depending on what you do. So just to conclude very quickly, so this masterclass is more a list of guidelines, not really strict rules. We will touch it briefly, but it's possible to subvert expectations by ignoring some of the guidelines, and it's perfectly fine. It's going to give potentially less clarity but funnier game situations, but you need to be aware of it when you're doing it. It's fine to ignore one of the guidelines if you're aware of the guideline, basically. Thank you very much for your attention. We'll now be taking additional questions if you have any.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Vincent. So guys, hit us with your questions in the comment section. We'll make sure to read them. Meanwhile, I'm going to answer the question that wasn't answered yet. The screenshots are polished. Yeah, that's right. Is the level of the quality expected as an output from Game Jam? So the screenshots that Vincent showed was games already published. So they were definitely already worked on, tweaked, polished. But honestly, they didn't look that much different from their first time. So usually as a hypercasual publisher or as a publisher in general, we expect this kind of quality for our games to be published or to be tested. But don't worry, it's hypercasual. The looks come secondly. It's mostly about innovation, about the mechanics. So if you think that you have a great idea, it can still work if you don't have enough skills to bring it up to that polished level. Just test it, and then we'll be able to help you afterwards to bring this game to this kind of level. All of these games went through iteration with us, and this is how they look right now. Hope it answered your question. Let's see. During the stage of prototyping, can we do A/B tests for color schemes? Yes, sure. The easiest to do is through creatives. So you don't have to make and don't have to upload 300 different builds. You can just make different levels with different color schemes, and we will use different levels in the creatives, basically in ads, and we'll see which ones have the the strongest conversion rate, and that means that this is version that's most interesting to people. And after the test, we can use game analytics to actually add events in different levels and see the interest of people on different levels and color schemes. Hope that answered your question. Let me know. Okay, let's wait for another minute or so for questions to come in, and then we can go to Fantin.
Yeah.
Red circle as danger or red triangle? Interesting.
So usually, because red is a very well-known symbol, sometimes it's enough by itself, and so you can use a red circle, but it also depends on what you already use in your game. If you have a lot of triangles, maybe adding one more will not attract the attention enough. So like in Nerf Epic Pranks we don't have this issue, so we used red spikes for like the shape itself.
So you basically merged the triangle and the circle together.
Basically.
Alright, what do you think about the story-based game? Well, I think everything is, we're open to explore everything. Just to keep in mind, if you purely want to work on hyper-casual game and you want to do a story-based hyper-casual game, remember that users, they pick up the phone and then want to play the game right away without remembering or understanding what they did before, yesterday, or 5 minutes ago. They just want to play and enjoy without any kind of extra brain activity or memory that requires to play the game. So that could be a small issue in the big storyline games, that it's not very it's not targeted to that much of an audience. It's not very hyper casual, but I'm sure there's ways to put it in the hyper casual space. Well, what else? You're welcome. The game mechanic a main factor behind the game success? Well, I would say yes, but still hyper casual. It's elements playing well together. Of course, I think the biggest one is the innovation, how you can innovate, how you can mix and match the mechanics in the way that it grabs the eye of the user. And then yes, of course, it's about mechanics, pure mechanics that can keep the user more in the game on day 1 or day 7. And on top of that, then we'll have tricks that we all know for the retention. But yeah, I would say the main thing is mechanics. Knife types of weapons allowed? I don't think so. We really try to keep it non-violent. I don't think Nerf has any kind of knife, at least not in our arsenal that we can use as blasters. So I would avoid knife type of games, but you can actually think out of the box. If you want to slice a person, don't do it on the person, do it on the object. Don't slice it, slice it with water blaster or super soaker. Think about audio we should consider. Are we going to have any audio masterclasses?
I don't think we're going to have audio masterclasses, but I think one thing you need to consider when using audio is a lot of players will play without the sound activated. So if you play something that is only through audio, like a feedback for example, they might not register it. So it needs to be supported by something else.
I see, thanks Vincent. I see there is a question on tips on tutorial. Actually, there's going to be the next masterclass with Fantin just now, so tune in. Versus can I make a bow game? You can try, but again, make sure that you stay with the topic that's Nerf toy blasters, and you can use Super Soaker. Again, maybe you can change up a little bit the team from the bow to a Super Soaker or Nerf blaster. Just I think using the creativity and imagination that will make this game jam successful. And actually, alright guys, I think if you have more of a general the game jam questions, please ask them in Discord. We have a full team there answering about the game jam, what kind of theme you can do, what you can use, what you can't. SDKs, analytics is there, and if you guys have any questions about this masterclass, please ask now, because you have the experts right here live with you. Let's wait a little bit. All the general questions that you're asking, don't worry, I'm going to be answering them a bit later, maybe on Discord, maybe here, but after the masterclass. Fire thrower. That's interesting. I really love the creativity. Like, if not water, can we use fire? I would stick a little bit more with water, but if you really want to use fire, we still can test the game. Maybe you just have to think, will it be eligible afterwards to put in any kind of IP inside this game? Yes, exactly. Yusuf, you asked that can we make a shooting game but never mention any violent words like kill, shoot, and just call it blast enemies? It's like a question. What do you think of a violent game? If you look at Nerf Epic Pranks, you still use your blaster. There are still people, but it's just fun. Nerf is all about having fun. It's not about being aggressive. It's not about being violent. So even if you don't use the specific words, but you show the violence in the game, it's not gonna really fit the theme. So really try to think out of the box and think how you can transfer this violence more into soft, fun, pranking kind of environment. Okay. Alright guys, so I think there's questions more about Nerf itself. Don't worry, I love these questions. We're gonna answer them a bit later. But I think I'll let Fantin to take over. Thanks so much, Vincent. So we catch up later.
Thank you.
You're sitting right there. So maybe you can see Vincent sitting and working there and answering your questions in Discord. You're in Discord, right?
Yes. If you have any question, whether it's about this masterclass specifically or any design topic, I will be answering them on Discord directly.
Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna switch to a second masterclass, and a lot of questions that I saw is to do with the second masterclass, so we can just switch.
Thank
Thanks
you very much for attending this masterclass, and I will now let my colleague Fantin take over. Thank you everyone, and see you on Discord.
Bye.
Bye.
Alright, here we have Fantin, our second game designer. Some of you I think also worked with Fantin before in the games that have been published. Fantin worked on many of the games that were published by Homa Games. So I'll just give you the mic because you're the expert on this.
Sure, thanks. So for this next masterclass, so we're going to take a look to signs and feedback. So basically it's just like following the game clarity masterclass you just had. So finding how to improve actually game clarity with the tools, some of the tools that Vincent presented just before, through signs and feedback. So this is almost using rational game design, which is about like putting that everything that you will put in your game makes sense and have a special purpose, has a meaning. Why are we doing this masterclass? Actually, it's because like in Hypercasual, as you already mentioned guys in the previous masterclass, in Hypercasual we are targeting a super broad audience. So it means also like non-players, people that aren't used to gaming codes, or even just people that don't have the time to get too much involved into a game. So they basically have a very low level of attention. So each feature, mechanic, element or action in your game should be obvious and understandable right away. This is why we are going to focus right now on signs and feedback and how to implement them. So quickly about the scope on this masterclass. So first we'll take a look into the definition of signs and feedbacks in games. Then we'll quickly pass on the tools that are used for signs and feedbacks and the tools that you can use with Unity to implement those. We will talk a bit again on subjects that Vincent already covered, but I'm sure it will still be interesting for you guys. We then gonna see how signs and feedbacks can be used on pretty common features that we have in Hypercasual, so such as tutorial, as you were asking guys. And then a quick part also on juiciness, how to polish signs and feedbacks and why actually you need to polish signs and feedbacks into your game. So starting right away, signs and feedbacks, what are they? Like why do we use them? Why are they so important in game design? Basically, it's just about making each action, each element, each feature in your game understandable right away. Like your player should be aware of what is going on in your game. So signs and feedbacks are learning and communication tools. So for signs, basically signs are like giving you clues, giving the player hints about what is going on the screen around the player. It's communicating a status of an element. It will highlight also causes of that specific action or element. It will show the possibilities and help the player to understand the decision possibilities he has. So it's really about having clues for the player to understand the relation he has with the different elements in the game, and to let him know what is about to happen or could happen.
To make it like crystal clear, so on the screenshot of Nerf Epic Pranks, you see that the sign is the exclamation mark surrounded by the red circle. So, but how do you actually, when you play the game for the first time, how do you know what's gonna cause this, or is it? Do you have to have a circle of kind of death and win in order to learn it completely?
Kind of. First of all, for example, in Nerf Epic Pranks, the situation before that exclamation mark will invite you for other actions. Just the first input of firing, and through firing, then the first hit on the enemy, the other character, will trigger this animation, this pop-up of an exclamation mark. So, talking about this exclamation mark, it is really here to communicate that something is going to change, that something is going to happen, and that the player should be aware of it. So, yeah, we could say that it will come through trying, but still, it's like even on the first try, normally the player should know what is going to happen.
I guess it's like combining with what Vincent was talking about. You put the sign, but to make sure that the sign communicates through the shapes, through the color, what is going to happen. And at least if the person is clueless, this can give you some clues. Okay, it's red, it's spiky, something's bad is going to happen.
Exactly, by using some codes that are shared between games and in our lives. So for feedbacks, it comes after the signs and after the action. And feedbacks are here to actually communicate to the player that something happened, that the action or the input has been registered in the game. It will highlight the consequences of that action, and it will introduce the new status of an element due to that action. So basically, it's really about giving results to an action triggered either by the game or by the player, and should be an immediate response. So the player is not lost and has a direct answer and direct result to what he saw that was going to happen actually. So for example, we can see here with Nerf Epic Pranks. I hope you can actually see it well, guys. Maybe the frame rate is a bit low, but still, so a lot of things are going on right now. We will focus on the feedbacks here. So there's a lot of things going on. First of all, the character is waiting for an input. When the input is done, the character moves. There's an animation. He will change position and will aim somewhere and shoot. Actually, just the bullet firing is also a feedback. Then you will have also this bounce, those bounces on the enemy that will just like let the player know that okay, they actually hit the enemy. And the exclamation mark, it's kind of special because like some feedback will actually turn into sign, because this exclamation mark we were talking about just before, it's first a feedback that you actually touched for the first time the opponent, and then becomes a sign that the opponent is going to react, and you have to get prepared on that. So with that in mind, knowing a bit more about what is concretely a sign or a feedback, you can see a bit more what is the interaction loop. So basically an interaction loop, is like having signs and feedback around a specific action, a specific feature, a specific element. So signs are here to give you clues about what is going to happen, to give you all the needed information for the player to get prepared, or even just to catch his attention on something, or just also even to make an element clearer. Then you have the action triggered by player's input or the game system, and then the feedback, which will display the actual result of what happened. And by the way, feedback should also like be very consistent with the sign, so you don't break actual players' expectations, because expectations will be built on the signs that he will see before that. And from there, together, signs and feedback around an action, it will actually bring learning to the player. So with signs and feedbacks, the player is understanding the possibilities and the consequences in the game. And with that, it will ease the learning process. And this is really what we want in Hypercasual, because as mentioned before, there's a very low level of attention from the players in Hypercasual. So we really want them to learn our game as fast as possible and to get them in control of the game as fast as possible too. So right now we are going to take a look to the different means that you have to implement proper interaction loops. So with those signs and feedbacks, we'll go over some stuff already mentioned by Vincent just before, and some other things. So this is a way I think that you can use to deconstruct a bit the different features or a specific element that you have in a game, an interactive element, is by asking yourself some questions. Like the main one would be, which information is needed to understand possibilities and consequences of an action? You really want the player to have all clues and to have your feature intuitive for the player. So for signs, how can the player understand the state of that element, that specific element you are working on? And feedbacks, how can the player understand that the action happened and its consequences actually? So how he will learn from what he just did, and how to build some new expectations maybe, and to progress in the game. So one of the first tools you can think of is basically text. It's not the most elegant way of implementing signs or feedbacks, but it's a super direct way to tell some stuff to your to display information to your player. So you can use basic text message, so just a word or a sentence on the screen, making it pretty clear. Maybe an onomatopoeia, always a bit hard to say. Those are like words that are representing some sounds. You can use emojis, very common and shared across countries. They carry a lot of meanings. Or symbols, as mentioned also by Vincent before. We have exclamation marks and interrogation marks that are pretty common too and used, and the meanings is pretty straightforward too. Talking again about the colors too, so I saw also, guys, that regarding the question of Lola, you were saying that you were a bit aware also of those meanings regarding the colors. We still have to keep in mind that between cultures, some colors aren't perceived the same way. Like I may be wrong on that, but I think, for example, that red in Japan is it's a super nice thing actually. It's very positive.
In Southeastern Asian countries, I think it's.
So this is still something to keep in mind, but in video games, we are sharing a lot of different codes, and some of those colors are just reused with the same elements, with the same purposes. So this is what we are going to call emotional color biases. So you have the red with danger, passion, green that is very positive usually in games, and blue a bit more neutral that represent peace, stability, and black that can be used to represent evil or even power. You also have other color schemes actually that are used mostly in marketing, but this is more about triggering our instincts to drive us to conversion. So we won't talk that much, actually not at all in this presentation on those, but I encourage you to take a look on Google if you find anything. Next, you can use your actual objects in the game. So talking about shapes, the form of an element in the game should follow a function. So taking the example of stack hoops, like the donuts, it's pretty obvious that they have to be put on those bars. So this is what we call affordance. You can use also the law of proximity, so the fact that close objects are perceived as related. Same for with the same example here with stack hoops, like maybe if those bars were a bit more spread around the screen, it won't be that obvious that you have to switch donuts from bars to bars and that they are very actually related. It's the whole gameplay is around those bars. And there is the location bias, quite close to the law of proximity, but it's just the fact that objects with similar functions should be in similar locations. Then I think it's the most common one is to use effects as a tool in your game. You have different type of effects. You have particles, super straightforward. It's just about like having particle system in your game. It's very diegetic also to put that. Also brings right away a bit of juiciness, which is pretty important in your game. Then you have also animations, like putting some feedbacks or even signs directly on your characters, on your every static meshes that you have in game. So when there is something that is happening, make your character bounce. If there is a movement, make it run. All of these are signs or feedbacks too, but it's pretty important to still think of them and can add also a lot to the game. You can have animation regarding the camera, so camera shakes, camera views. On the camera view, you can just the fact of making some transitions like zooming in and all will actually bring a lot of information to your player. For example, for a zoom in, it means like there is a focus to make on a specific element, this kind of stuff. So it brings a lot of information, it carries a lot of information to your player. And you can also use animations for color transitions. For example, heat feedback where the character is blinking actually. This is a color transition and it will catch the eye of the player too. And it will carry also like a progression, maybe an evolution of something, because if you go from green to red, maybe the element was positive and then turned out negative. So you can do a lot here with animation. You can also use haptics, something that we use a lot in mobile game development, mostly in Hypercasual. I would say it's one of our main focus even. This is an amazing tool. So it's basically vibrations with more granularity by using different frequencies and intensities. With those you can really make your player feel different stuff actually. So it is very important. It can be used also for progression, all these kind of things, and it's very, very important.
Yeah, I would say that haptics is one of my favorite elements, and I think the studios that work with me and in chat can confirm that I always try to put haptics. Even though haptics is more of a retention element, because you can't really see it on CPI.
Yeah, for sure. But when you play with haptics, it actually brings a lot of game feel, and the player will be more in your game actually.
So yeah, more engaged, meaning
exactly.
like in terms of talking about effects on the actual KPIs of Hypercasual, it's longer session time and higher retention on the next day. Meaning like more ads watched. But I also wanted to say that effects actually, they're not only on the really great engagement tool for session time and retention, they actually can help to lower down your CPI, because as Fantin said, there's a lot of information packed in kind of small elements, and usually the user watches around 5 seconds of the ad, and if this 5 seconds will have as much information as possible and not be overwhelming, like you're not going to have too much text, but you're going to have this subliminal kind of effects and how do you call them, tools and signs that can actually lower your CPI. So really guys, I think it's a great take a screenshot if you like it's later, it's going to be online, but make sure to pay a lot of attention to the slides.
So yeah, I will just go on a bit on what you were saying actually. Like here we presented some of the tools, the tools that you can use to add some signs and feedbacks, and they shouldn't be used on their own. Actually, they should be used on top of each other to make everything clearer and clearer. The more you use them to display an information and combining all those tools, the best it is actually. So getting into common features in game structures of Hypercasual games, the tutorial. So signs are used and very important in tutorials. So let's say you have a mechanic that is pretty straightforward, pretty simple to understand. Maybe you don't have to display much things, just like show what should be the input, actually. A small animation to show it. So an example. Let's say you have a mechanic that is a bit more ambiguous, if it's a word. Yeah. And so here you would prefer actually to tell directly to the player what to do. And if you have a mechanic that is very, very complex or even just boring to read, maybe you want the player to learn it through gameplay. So for that you will use signs to appeal the players from step to step into your tutorial. Then on players' performance rating, so very important stuff here, giving real-time feedback on what the player is actually doing in your game is super important. It can lead to satisfaction just by telling the player that he's actually doing the right things, that he's going into the right direction. Super important. But it can also help you to actually get your player better to the game if he's doing something wrong. So it's kind of a good way of using some of the tools we presented in-game when the player is actually performing something, and displaying that information of the performance is really important and very useful. Then alerts. So here it's really about when you want to catch players' attention on something specific at a specific moment too. So let's say the player is losing or about to lose. You want him to notice that because you want him also to get satisfied at the end. So you want him to correct his behavior in the game. So let's say in Stealth Master, for example, when the character is actually taking some damages, you will see the life bar going lower, but your character will also blink in white. So since you don't have some other white elements in the screen, it will actually catch player's attention, and he will notice that and will be maybe more careful after that. So it's also about making sure that the player notice that the status of an important element changed. So always about getting his attention. As I mentioned here, so the red is often used to signal danger, but an alert could be really anything else that really brings and surprises the player at a point to catch his attention.
Like, what would you say? For example, if the door was locked and got unlocked, for player to notice that the doorway is there, it will change the color, or
could change the color. You could have an animation on the door, maybe a bounce, maybe a movement on the door. All things like. Again, multiply also the different feedback that you have when something is happening in the game.
Mm-hmm.
For game progression, so here signs and feedbacks will be used mainly to display to the player what he already achieved, which is also always a great thing because you want him to know that he's achieving some stuff in your game, but also to display how long it will take him to achieve some other stuff, or maybe just to display him that he has some of the stuff to achieve actually. So very important here too, gives a lot of information to your player and could drive a lot the different session length on your game. For example, let's say you have some world and you chain your levels, but you have special levels. Displaying that you have some special levels into the progress bar, a new icon different than for the other levels, can actually build expectations for the player and could drive him to play at least on until this new level. Here I think it's one of the most important thing to talk about here. It's about rewards and level completion. Mainly feedback here, but very important because it's the end of your main game loop. So it's something that the player will reach at any moment in your game, and a lot of time actually. So you really want him to understand what is happening at the end of your level, but surely you also want him to feel accomplished. So to make him feel that he actually achieved something, and that he understand what he achieved and what could be achieved in the next levels. So for that, using ratings on his performance, confettis, fireworks, basic stuff, just to make him feel comfortable and give him the feeling of achieving something. And you can use very rewarding stuff here. The casino effect, used a lot, just about triggering different animations in sequence, which brings a flood of satisfaction, and it's very used everywhere. You can also build some expectations, so kind of signs, by making him earn some currency, for example. This way he will know that there is some pickups in the game, that they are important, maybe that he can spend something. It can also introduce new features. So a lot of signs and feedbacks can be used here in the level completion stream. Going to choices, mostly signs here. We will use them here mostly to explicit the results of choices. You don't want your player, and be careful on that also, on what you are using to explicit those results. We don't want the player to have expectations on the result of a choice and not fulfilling this expectation. So it's about giving clues to the player, but giving clues that will lead to the actual result. It can also be used to orient to a specific choice, using scale, for example, specific colors, specific effects on a button. Maybe you want the player to make a specific decision, and you will use those elements to make him do that specific action you want. Quite the same, using sign and feedbacks for call to action. So it's about guiding or even just catching players' attention on something in particular. Quite the same thing as before, but here you may also just want him to do. You are just waiting for him to do an input, and you want him to know what input he should do actually.
So it's also not really about just putting a button. It's actually to think where the button, how it looks like,
exactly,
the animations.
Exactly. Why also that button stands out from others, and how and why it stands out actually.
I think you can come a bit closer because you're outside of the frame. Yeah.
Perfect. To finish this masterclass, we'll go through a small part we call juiciness. And juiciness is just about making everything sexy in your game. So you have your action, the sign and the feedback of your action. It's kind of clear now, understandable for the player. Now you want it to be satisfying. You want it to be great and addictive. So polishing signs and feedbacks will bring juiciness and will make everything feel like a toy. And this is very important if you want to keep your player and to have a player that is enjoying your game. So to polish your game, as I was saying, you have your signs and feedback that are implemented. Now you can add layers of effects. So going through what we already talked about, using also sound and all, like put them on top of each other and it will bring a lot of things. Next, you can use exaggeration, like when you are using particle systems, maybe make them bigger, make that explosion bigger, and it will be funnier. Maybe add a camera shake to that explosion. It will be exaggerated, but very fun and very good to feel actually. Adding some details also, so to make your game feel a bit more alive. One example I have in mind is the small darts that we are actually using to tag people in Nerf. If you make them bounce on the ground and all, it feels alive. Like there's a real world behind this screen, and everything works together. This is very important. Like this brings a lot of juice actually. And tweaking after is like when you have all of those, it's about going into the details, the values, and balancing everything to make it feel right. And after that, with your artistic direction, actually you will have a whole identity for your game, which is also pretty important.
Yeah, like if you think of it as well as cinematography or filmmaking, because the movie and the game is behind the screen, you're not, and if it's done as in real life physics and real life effects, you're missing you're missing the temperature, you're missing the smell. So the elements that you're not missing has to be extra exaggerated to kind of compensate for the elements that you're missing for the whole immersive experience.
Exactly. Something that you should still be aware of, it's not putting too much of them and something that will break maybe visibility in your game. And now the conclusion of this masterclass. So, as we talked about, signs and feedbacks are mandatory for games clarity. You need those. Like in Hypercasual, you need the player to learn your game right away. Like he needs also, like, seeing a 3-second video, he needs to understand what is happening everywhere on the screen. From there, adding effects, exaggeration, details, and tweaking, it will bring great game feel, juiciness. And this juiciness, this good game feel on the core gameplay will hook the players actually. In the end, what you want is really to make everything feel like a toy the player can play around with. That. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Hope it was great for you. If you have any questions, do not hesitate.
Yeah, there were some questions. Thank you so much, Fantin. Guys, you can start asking questions now. We will go over what you wrote in the chat before. What would be a good sign clue for swiping movement? Example, player can swipe the finger to left or right to do some actions in the game, like moving stuff. Yeah, I think it's to do with the tutorial. So
yeah, totally. It's totally into a tutorial thing. So here, I think you already have maybe a more complex input than just a swipe in one direction, which is pretty rare, but still. Maybe you can here have some steps, like the first step when he has to swipe right, a small slow motion or a pause with the indication of the movement, a small animation, an icon animated that invites the player to swipe actually in a way or the other.
Yeah, don't be afraid to put the actual icon of the finger
Exactly.
of the hand on the screen, and maybe even some tail effect. I don't know how it goes, like the trail effect. Sorry, the trail effect. So it actually shows that you have to not only move your hand like this, but you actually need to swipe on the screen and leave the finger on the screen for a little bit.
After, as we said, maybe your mechanic behind that is even more complex and there is more stuff to know. So maybe you really want a full sequence of tutorial on the different steps of your mechanic. But I think here, if it's a very simple arcade game with just swiping inputs, you can go for just an animation of the hand on the screen.
We even sometimes put a swipe word. Like the animation is always better.
Yeah, if you feel like it's a plus to add it.
Alright, doesn't haptic feedback cause battery issue? Yeah, on some phones definitely, so it's important to not overload your phone with a lot of haptic, and to make sure you optimize your code for every phone. Is it very important to drastically change the environment when the player progresses through the levels?
Here I would say yes. I think it's important not only to show progression, but also to add variety to your game, which is pretty important in Hypercasual. Players will get bored pretty easily. If you can bring some new stuff to the eye often, it helps a lot. But other than that, yeah, it's a huge progression indicator actually. So yeah, I would say yes.
But I wouldn't just only rely your progression only on the environmental change. I think it's a great addition, yeah. But make sure that the mechanic is interesting enough for the person to come back in different environments. Does an environment effects has an effect on game, like rain, wind, snow?
I think yes, it can. It brings a certain mood to the player, so still about feelings, which is quite important in game design. So yes, but pretty sure you can still use other things to, if you want to carry a special meaning or a special thing, a special attention or whatever, you can use something else, but it's a nice addition to put. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's wait for a couple of more seconds. Let's say another minute for your question, guys. We'll wait here with Fantin for your questions. All right. Well, while we're waiting, I want to just remind you that the submission is on 21st of September. It's not on 22nd, so please submit your game on 21st of September. And again, please check your email with which you registered on the Game Jam. We send the invitation link there to our automated testing platform called Homa Lab. It's very straightforward to use, but if you have any questions, please let us know in Discord. And again, the assets are on the Discord announcement channel. What else we have there? We have there the references, the game designers. Please ping them as much as possible, especially about these masterclasses. If you forgot something, if you didn't understand something, or you have new ideas, please, we always like to chat with you, especially during this game jam. Okay. Well, can the character use besides shotgun, grenades, rocket launch? Please help. Okay, so thank you, Maria. Well, we would prefer to stick with the theme of the game jam, Nerf toy blasters, and with the assets that we give you. Please go over to the Discord and to the information channel, and you would see all rules that you can or can't follow. And if there's any extra questions, please ask right away in Discord. Andrea is there, our marketing girl here. I'm there. Other publishing managers, game designers. Olivier is there. Okay, thank you, Fantin, so much. Yeah, he is a great game designer, and we're very proud to have him. And I guess also the other studios that work with Fantin can attest to that.
A small thing regarding what Maria was asking. I think this is actually a great subject to show that the signs and feedbacks that you are going to use will carry different meanings, because I think you can actually use shotguns, grenades or rocket launcher, but if you make some particle effects like in Nerf Epic Ranks, it feels very casual, very toyful. So it depends on how you put this juiciness behind and how you build the identity of your game around those.
Like, of course you can have bigger blasters and bigger super soakers and make it exaggerated. Maybe it's not about tagging people. It's destroying little pyramids of. If you look at the YouTube very viral videos with Nerf, you will see like people do crazy stuff with oversized blasters, with oversized super soakers. But again, as Fantin said, just make sure the whole game feel should be about fun, about tagging, and nothing to do with the violence. Okay, great. UA creators requirements. Yes, there will be very small requirements. They will be all on our automated platform. It's only about the format that you have to screen record your game, or just record it through the Unity platform. Nothing really crazy. Okay. Maria, let us know what questions do you still have through Discord, please, and we'll make sure to answer your questions. I think we answered about the grenades and rocket launcher, but I remember you had a bit more. We will make sure to answer it in the Discord. But okay, I think we're about on time for our masterclass. Thank you so much, guys, for joining.
Thank you.
Good luck to everyone. I'm sure you're gonna do really great stuff. Can't wait to see your submissions. If you have any questions, please ask. Again, you were sent the link. The theme is Nerf Toy Blasters. Join us on Discord. If you want to join us on LinkedIn, please follow us on LinkedIn. Add me on LinkedIn. We're always happy to chat with you. And again, have a nice day or evening, the time of the day in your country. Awesome. We really, really appreciate that you like this stuff, and